Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, the first part thereof for the 19th of November 2025. This is going to be a bumper edition. There's an awful lot to talk about, including the ATACMs strike, ballistic missile strike into Russia yesterday. Huge strikes last night from Russia into Ukraine. Ternopil has been absolutely hammered. There are at least 16 dead there. Horrendous. Talks in Turkey have been cancelled. Between Witkoff and Zelensky, Witkoff and Andrew Yermak. You've got the corruption scandal still going on. So very much to talk about. Let's get into it. If you haven't know already, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. That really helps out the channel. So thank you. Okay. We're going to start right at the beginning with the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course, and you can find them linked in the description below. Sorry for the delay there. There is the infographic. 850 personnel lost, which is below the 1,000. So that's somewhat lower than we have seen it. A single tank, single armored combat vehicle. We have 12 artillery systems, which is less than we are used to. All of these categories fairly low. One single multiple launch rocket system, 56 vehicles and fuel tanks, and one piece of special equipment. So generally speaking, those are lower stats than there have been over the last week or so. What does that tell us? Is it weather? Is it what Russia is doing? Are they not attacking in a number of places because they are exhausting themselves? There are several analyses to suggest that Russia are exhausting themselves at the moment. The Institute for the Study of War has a report whereby they're saying that they are exhausting themselves in the Pokrovsk area alone by trying to both encircle Pokrovsk and attack through. Really, they should just be concentrating on one or the other, probably the encirclement, but they're actually trying to do everything and expending huge numbers of troops in so doing. And the same could be said of a number of places along the front line. So there are some who, if you're going to be very positive for Ukraine at the moment, it is that Russia might well be exhausting themselves, and whatever victory they get in terms of territory comes at a huge cost in material and personnel, and it would be arguably or could be a Pyrrhic victory. On the other hand, they are indeed pressuring the Ukrainians all over the shop and making those territorial gains, as we have seen so often. Okay, the coordinator of Ukraine's POW treatment HQ says Russia has forcibly mobilized over 46,000 Ukrainian citizens from occupied territories into its armed forces. As a result, approximately 1 in 6 captured Russian soldiers turns out to be a Ukrainian citizen. I wonder how open these forced recruits from occupied territories are to surrendering, how whether they are much more likely to go in and surrender than a normal Russian from the Russian Federation itself. So another war crime the International Criminal Court seems to want to pretend isn't happening is making people under occupation fight against their homeland, says Tim White. Ukraine's Coordination Council has identified 46,000 Ukrainian men from Ukrainian territories ordered by Russia to take part in the war. And here's the extra bit. Over 35,000 are from Crimea, is the claim. Absolutely staggering statistics there. So Russia forcibly mobilized 46,327, as we've heard, 6% from Crimea. That is the Deputy HUR Chief Usov, the military intelligence deputy there. So if that is true, staggering statistics. We have another Chris Wiki thread. I'm not going to read through it because we've got so much to get through today. But he says Russian soldiers say they are being minimally equipped. So stuff we've already heard, but more and more, the more and more we hear this, the more it moves from being anecdote to being actual data. Minimally equipped, and told to scavenge supplies from corpses in infiltration missions in which most of them will be killed. Artillerymen and drone operators are being expended as stormtroopers. So that is, again, something we have seen previously. Scavenging for food and water. An exchange of short comments between Russian war bloggers who are fighting in Ukraine highlights the realities of Russia's current tactic of sending small, minimally equipped groups of men to infiltrate Ukrainian positions in the face of omnipresent drones. In our battalion, they don't even use PKMs, machine guns, for missions right now. Everyone works exclusively with Kalashnikovs, and there are no multi-person teams. Assault teams work in pairs, 6 magazines per person. If you want more, scavenge the corpses along the way. They advance in pairs, and those who reach the target pile up. Then the survivors attempt a ground assault. If they're lucky, they'll remain in the position they've taken and fortified, so on and so forth. So, yeah, we've seen a lot of this before. It's interesting to note that actually, this is a very short thread. I might just finish off, but it's very interesting to note that there have been these claims that the Russian MOD is going after mill bloggers now, that the Russian mill bloggers, unless they are properly falling in line with the narrative from the MOD, are being targeted by the MOD. Quote, food, water, and ammunition are limited to what they brought with them, plus whatever they found, and maybe half a litre of water and a couple of Snickers if they're lucky. In short, in addition to combat, you also need to focus on survival. During the final assault on Abdos, everyone in our company gave magazines to the first assault groups, keeping one for themselves, but then casualties started to pile up, and the drone operators and fire support went into the assault. They had 1 magazine each, and so the cycle goes on. The assault troops perish with their magazines. Trey, apparently a call sign, collects magazines from other dead people, 200s, and takes them for himself, and then they're distributed to new assault troops, and so it goes. Now the order has come to collect weapons, armor, radios, magazines from the dead, and search for Mavic drones, and the 200s themselves, lying around since the beginning of the year, are no use to anyone. Okay, so that is one interpretation of what's going on. Unconfirmed reports suggest Russia, and this was going around lots yesterday, haven't heard anything since, but a number of different sources were saying that a Su-35 had been rumored to be shot down over Crimea by its own air defense, not for the first time. Heard nothing since then, but that would be really, really good news for the Ukrainians. Su-35 is a more recent jet that the Russians utilize. There were claims that there were missiles flying over, maybe long Neptune missiles flying over Crimea, and the Su-35 was misinterpreted as being one of these missiles and was shot down by Russian air defense. But I don't have any more information on that, so take it with a pinch of salt. Okay, then we're going to go to this article in the Eurominded Press, which I find pretty fascinating. This is how Ukraine's F-16s hide from Russian drones. So you've had this situation where Ukraine was losing a bunch of F-16s initially once they started receiving them, and they lost, I don't know how many. Ukraine is now losing fewer of these F-16s as time has elapsed. So there are too few. Russian missiles and drones are a constant threat to the Air Force, ground crews, fuel, and are as Air Force ground crews, fuel and arm the single-engine, single-seat supersonic F-16s. The crews hurry to get the jet off the ground before the Russian munitions barrel in. One maintainer said in a recent official video, quote, prepare the plane, put the pilot in it, and hide in the shelter, is how he described his nightly labor. There are too few ground crews, spare parts and weapons for the nimble F-16s, 85 of which Belgium, Denmark, and the Netherlands and Norway have pledged to Ukraine from their own surplus stocks. The work is quite difficult and intensive because there are shortages, a second maintainer said in the same video. But the hard-working ground crews have gained invaluable experience since the first operational F-16s arrived in Ukraine in August 2024. The Air Force lost, here it is, 4 of the hard-to-replace jets in the first 10 months of the operations, but they haven't lost any since June. So why is that? The 50th may already be in Ukraine, is the claim here. The overall pace of sorties increased. So they might have 50 operational F-16s. F-16 is about to become the most numerous type of jet in service with the Ukrainian Air Force, outnumbering ex-Soviet MiG-29s and Su-27s. It's a stopgap for their battered Air Force, as they've ordered a whole bunch of Gripens and Rafales. So it's not for no reason Kyiv wants a Swedish Gripen to avoid Russian bombardment that could wipe out its roughly 125 surviving fighters. The Ukrainian Air Force splits its flying brigades into small teams that travel by truck to airstrips and even lengths of highway all across central and western Ukraine. Quote, we often have to use operational airfields, the first maintainer said. We mostly work at night. Saab designed a Gripen from the wheels up for operations from short, dirty airstrips. Its twin air intakes are high enough on the fuselage to mitigate the risk they'll suck up damaging debris. The F-16 can fly from the same airstrips, of course, but it's riskier given the American-designed jet's low-slung air intake. The dispersed flight ops are hectic and dangerous. A few maintainers prepare a few jets, launch them as quickly as possible, then scurry into cover in case the Russians spot the launching fighters and attack with drones or missiles. Quote, there are situations where even after we launched a plane, a Russian munition was flying over us and we literally had time to run to cover, and there was already an explosion 100 meters away. The first ground crewman recalled. It's unclear how many jets a single team might launch at one time from a single location. It's telling, however, that one dispersed Air Force ground crew launched enough F-16s to fire 45 missiles in one night, according to the second maintainer. A Ukrainian F-16 typically flies air defense sorties, defending against Russian drones and cruise missiles with a load of just 6 air-to-air missiles. In other words, you would assume that in that one night, unless that same plane was landing and taking off multiple times, that you've got a good 8 aircraft there, potentially. That implied a single location may have launched 9 F-16s, they say here, or recovered, rearmed and relaunched the same smaller number of F-16s during the same night. It's an impressive achievement for an outnumbered, outgunned air force. Expect even better results once Gripens arrive. Interesting stuff from the Euromonitor press there. Okay, just a bit of footage here of a destroyed Zemlyadelaya remote mining system. Now, I do wonder about these. So the Russians, I mean, this is useful. They can throw off all sorts of mines, or many, many mines, into surrounding fields as they drive past. But of course, you lay mines as a defense, and the Russians are going to be laying, if they are laying all these mines, they are to defend against Ukrainian attacks. The Ukrainians don't look like they really are going to be attacking anywhere soon. But anyway, good to see that kind of kit taken out there. An incredible bit of footage here. So this is a Fab 500T with a UMP-KPD, so a guided glide kit attached to the bomb, has flown right next to a reconnaissance drone here and is caught on camera. This is pretty incredible, and this is a Russian drone by the looks of it. But a Russian bomb then just passes right by it and slams into. It doesn't look like there's much of a target there, but there's a bridge coming over here, so it could be some kind of logistics. Flies right past the drone and then does seem to hit the field rather than road there. So I don't know what that says about the accuracy of these things, or whether there's something we just can't see there. But pretty incredible. You get to see that guided glide bomb so close to the reconnaissance drone. Right, now we're going to move on to the claim of the ATACMs being sent into Voronezh region yesterday. So I did a breaking news update on this, and as soon as I did one, because a fighter bomber, the Russian source was saying these were probably Krim 2s or Grom 2s. The Ukrainian evolution from the Sapsan missile, their own ballistic missiles. So the claim that these were ballistic missiles. And lots of people talking about the Krim 2 because of what fighter bombers said. Then straight after my video, of course, typically, the Ukrainians said themselves that they were ATACMs. Okay, Russians claim ballistic missiles were launched toward Belgorod and Voronezh regions, with residents in Shebekino spotting launch trails. Footage shows air defense in action, but whether anything was intercepted remains unclear. As always, Russia claims everything was shot down. So the Russians claimed everything was shot down. And you saw here the puffs of smoke in the sky here. So there are 4 puffs of smoke, as you can see at the bottom. Now, this was thought to be air defense by many people, but it might well have been if they were ATACMs, and if they were cluster ATACMs, the kind of mechanism that then launches the cluster munitions will explode up here and launch those clusters. So it could be that these were not shot down at all, and they might well have been successfully used. So the Ukrainian General Staff confirmed it used ATACMs ballistic missiles for precision strikes on military targets inside Russia, likely connected to the attack on Voronezh today. Quote, the use of long-range strike capabilities, including systems such as the ATACMs, will continue. Here we've got another source saying this is understanding the goals in Voronezh. We will monitor. Maybe today we'll announce where it went, but not yet. That's how it should be. The first strike under Trump with American weapons deep into the Russian Federation. So people saying that this is the first time they've been used deep into Russia. Some people are saying the first time ever. No, they did use them before after Biden gave permission when the Russians started using North Korean troops. That allowed them to be used, but it's unclear whether the Americans stopped them being used subsequently or whether they just didn't have enough of them. They've just got some more and they've used some, who knows? But anyway, they've just used them again. Let's say what we can for now. There were several targets. One of the facilities was the Pogonovo training ground, and there was a concentration of military units. So the claim is that, you know, they're going for personnel. It was from this place that the first large-scale concentration of troops began, which later grew into the invasion in February 24th, 2022. So this is an area of troop accumulation that acted back in 2022 for the launching pad for the invasion. So Anton Gerashenko, the armed forces of Ukraine successfully employed ATACMs tactical missiles, so the claimants that it successfully did so, to carry out precision strikes against military targets in Russia. Significant development that underscores Ukraine's unwavering commitment to its sovereignty was the claim. Despite the ongoing pressure of Russian offensive actions, this is the statement from the General Staff. Ukrainians remain resilient, demonstrating determination and consistent resolve in defending their homeland. The use of long-range strike capabilities, including systems such as ATACMs, will continue. Then we have here missile debris confirming Ukraine launched ATACMs at Russia's Voronezh region yesterday, the first time under the Trump presidency. The Russian MOD says S-400 and Panzer systems intercepted part of the salvo. Ukrainian sources say a military training ground was struck with some missiles downed. So there is, okay, you have some claims from the Russians that they took them all out. Then you have some claims from the Russians that they took some of them out. Then you have claims from the Ukrainians that they were all successful. Then you have claims from the Ukrainians that some of them were taken out. So who knows here? So Exile Nova says there is an assumption that none of the 4 ATACMs missiles aimed at Voronezh were shot down. So this source saying that 4 smoke trails were recorded in the sky near the impact site. These are trails formed by ATACMs missiles in the cluster version at the moment of successful deployment of warhead over the target. So you have this puff of smoke as the missile then gets rid of its booster and it releases the submunitions, as you can see there. And those 4 puffs of smoke might well have been 4 of these missiles doing exactly what they're supposed to do. Russians published photos of the remains of these missiles, the hulls without the warheads, without the characteristic damage from air defense. This appearance is typical for ATACMs after regular use, when a cluster warhead is deployed in the air and the empty engine casing simply falls to the ground. All this indicates that the missiles were not shot down, but served their intended purpose, deploying submunitions over the target. ATACM strike. Another target was the Baltimore airfield, and above it, in one video, we can see 4 smoke trails formed by ATACM's missile in a cluster version the moment of successful deployment of the warhead over the target. So it might be an airbase that was actually hit, and what you were seeing with those puffs of smoke were over the airbase. There's also talk about troop accumulations, etc., etc. So yeah, it could well be that there was absolutely no none of these missiles were shot down, and all of them could have been successfully sent into Ukraine, into Russia. Then we had this, and I find this very interesting. Not sure what to make of this, other than AMK mapping. Now, some of you might know AMK mapping. They say realistic pro-Ukraine news account and mapper, focusing on Ukraine and the Middle East. It has this New Zealand flag in the avatar, name, title, whatever, handle. That's it. At the beginning of the war, seemed to be more pro-Ukrainian. Now seems to be very pro-Russian. Although claims to be pro-Ukrainian, account infested often with Russians and saying very pro-Russian things. And this is an example. I'm not denying that something meaningful was hit here, and I'm not really denying that they were 2 HIMARS that were hit here. But the assertions are very pro-Russian. So yesterday, the claim is a Russian Iskander-M ballistic missile struck a Ukrainian HIMARS position, destroying 2 Gimler's launchers near the village of Voloska Balaklaya in Kharkiv Oblast. These launchers were used to launch 4 ATACMs ballistic missiles at Voronezh yesterday, all of which are shot down by Russian S-400 air defense. Right. So we have the claim that 4 ballistic missiles were fired, and all 4 were shot down by Russian air defense. Now, that claim is just basically consistent with the most maximalist of Russian claims, not even some other Russian claims. I said to you, some Russian claims have been like, nah, no, some of them were shot down. But we also understand that actually it's likely that none of them were shot down, and these were submunitions being utilized successfully. And then to say that these launchers were used to launch the 4 ATACMs is like, you need some what's called epistemic humility here. So in philosophy, you would say, you need to understand what you know and what you don't know, and use language in accordance with that, rather than these launchers were definitely used to launch the 4 ATACMs that were definitely used against Voronezh yesterday, and all of those missiles were definitely shot down by Russian S-400 air defense. And that here we have Iskander-Ms that definitely blew up and destroyed 2 Gimlet launchers, 2 HIMARS. Someone says, I have no idea how you can tell it's HIMARS launchers in that video, other than it's written it's that. To which AMK Mapping says, the shape resembles a launcher. Rocket fuel is seen afterwards, and it's been geolocated to one of the closest possible positions for striking Voronezh. Okay, well, that's circumstantial evidence. Maybe you're right, but I will wait and see. So, just epistemic humility. Another source says, or another commenter here says, these launchers were used. This is a kind of tongue-in-cheek quote. Scare quotes. These launchers were used to launch 4 ATACMs ballistic missiles at Voronezh yesterday, all of which were shot down by Russian S-400 air defense. This is so Russian propaganda. You clearly work for the money received. Anyway, that said, it is plausible that 2 HIMARS were indeed hit in, if this is indeed Kharkiv, by the Russians. Now, I would have thought you would have shot and scooted. If I was to be the most hopium, it would be that this actually happened sometime before, and they were waiting for a missile strike, and then they release this. That sometimes happens, where the Ukrainians have success, and the same with the Russians. Russians have success, and then suddenly you get a bit of footage that kind of shows that they've already got revenge on that. Because my goodness, if they released these launchers and they were hit straight away, like something's going wrong with the Ukrainians there. But I would have thought, fire the missiles, and unless you're going to fire some more straight away, get the hell out of Dodge, get back to somewhere safe, out of the range of reconnaissance drones and whatnot. Anyway, let's watch a video and see what we can make out. So the claim is these are 2 Gimlers, 2 HIMARS launchers. I wouldn't be able to comment on that, given that I can barely make anything out. And then one seems to be hiding in a tree. Then you have a big old strike with an Iskander. Now, to be fair, the Russians aren't going to waste Iskanders on nothing, and there is secondary explosions here. So I am assuming that something important has been hit, and it might well be HIMARS. But it's just the way I would say this is, these are plausibly 2 HIMARS that have been hit, and they may well have been the HIMARS that launched the ATACMs into Voronezh, the ATACMs that probably were successful. So I would phrase that completely differently. But anyway, if they are HIMARS, obviously that's going to be really annoying for the Ukrainians. What's fascinating from this whole topic is that actually they do have HIMARS. They do have ATACMs missiles. I think, yesterday I was like, breaking news, these could well be Hrim 2s, which tells us something pretty cool, which is the Ukrainians are making their own ballistics. But it's almost as cool that they still have ATACMs, and that could indicate that they are continuing to get ATACMs. There's a big gap between them being used previously and being used now. Did they have those ATACMs the whole time, or have they just been delivered some more? And if they've just been delivered some more, then that is really good news too. Anyway, I'm sure more information will emerge. Now we're going to go to the incredibly bad night of strikes on Ukraine, even though actually the interception rates were okay. But what has hit badly. Badly in terms of hitting some key infrastructure, but also sadly as well hitting residential infrastructure that has led to multiple deaths. 476 drone strikes, of which 442 were intercepted, leaving 34 to get through. Actually, that's okay. In fact, that's really quite good. That's over 90%, isn't it? 90% interception rate. So that's not bad. 34 out of 40 KH-101 cruise missiles were taken out. That's okay. 6 missiles getting through. 7 out of 7 calibers were taken out. So all calibers were intercepted, which is one reason I think calibers are used less. Not only that, generally fire them from ships in the Black Sea, and that's becoming, I think, potentially more difficult for the Russians, sorry, but also that they are intercepted more easily. And then an Iskander-M ballistic missile, one was sent and it was not intercepted. So 7 missiles and 34 strike drones hit 14 locations, and then fragments fell in another 6 locations. So that, another 6 places can still have massive fires as a result of an intercepted drone. Right, okay, so here is the missile map that shows you that an awful lot of drones were sent actually into the east of Ukraine. Dnipro, we know that there's some energy facilities that were hit in Dnipro, right along the front line here. Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Konstantinivka, Pokrovsk, Myrnohrad, who knows, those kind of places. Then we have up in Kharkiv and south of Kharkiv. I don't know if is that Poltava way. No, I don't know. Anyway, Kharkiv, and then around Kharkiv and south of Kharkiv. And then we also have Ternopil. So Ternopil is where most of the footage you'll see today will come from, but also Lviv, some massive fires in Lviv that have erupted. And we can see the missiles were aiming mainly south of Lviv towards Ivano-Frankivsk, but not Ivano-Frankivsk. So there's probably some key installations, whether it's airfields or whether it's military industrial complex, something over here has been hit, and we probably won't hear about what that was, is my guess. Okay, F-16s and Mirage 2000 pilots intercepted and destroyed at least 10 incoming cruise missiles using their jets defensively in total over the entire period of combat use. F-16s have taken down more than 1,300 enemy aerial targets. That's a phenomenal number. So the F-16s working really very hard. Tim White says almost 50 missiles, over 500 warheads launched by the state hell-bent on imperialism and terrorism to achieve its goals. The targets today were cities less often hit in the almost 4-year-old war, and many civilians have been murdered. So here is Ternopil, which is hit by both missiles and Shaheds. The mayor announced that 9 people are confirmed. Well, actually now I think it's 16, 14, possibly 16, I think, now have been killed. And you can see just huge rents in these civilian buildings, residential buildings, just horrific scenes coming from Ternopil. Rescue workers are still obviously operating there and will be for some time, no doubt. Here is what an image that is. Look at that building, and that's why you are going to see, unfortunately, so many dead today. There'll be more and more people picked out of rubble. All those floors up in Ternopil, just horrendous scenes. And of course, then there's explosion behind that building in another area. So last night, Russia struck a residential building, Ternopil, killing 10, death toll now, actually, as I say, up to 14 or 16 now. Search and rescue operations continue there. Every day, innocents are killed. This has already become a terrifying and grim routine, says Anton Gerashenko, to the point that journalists and global media hardly report on these murders. Dozens are dead and injured, with cities across Ukraine under constant attacks. Kharkiv, Kherson, Dnipro, Lviv, Odessa, Kiev, others. Today it's Ternopil. The distance from Ternopil to Krakow or Lublin is the same as to Kiev. So it's just as far from major Polish cities as it is from the capital of Ukraine. The war is close. The war is happening in Europe. The war is not ending. Russia has no intention of stopping. And here we have, a video of a poor child upset, but I think it's worth reminding ourselves of the human impact of this war. As her face is covered in blood. As again, Gerashenko says, a video shows a little girl injured and terrified by the Russian attack. My heart breaks for Ukrainian kids and their suffering. I'm a dad myself. It's very hard to see what nightmares Russia makes of Ukrainian childhoods. And here we have what looks like that same building from the other direction here. Massive Russian missile and drone attack on Ukraine last night. Residential buildings attacked in Ternopil, at least 9 people killed, dozens more injured. I think the injuries up to 64 injured, which 14 of them are children. And then we have, 14, 16 dead. 3 people injured in Ivano Frankivsk, 2 of them children. Energy infrastructure under attack there. Energy and critical infrastructure targeted in the Lviv region. In Kharkiv, energy infrastructure, transport, civilian infrastructure was damaged. Dozens of people injured. So again, it's energy, civilian, energy. But then probably actually a lot of military targets that we just don't hear so much about. Explosions heard in Lviv, Ternopil, Khmelnytsky, Pripyatia, Odessa, Kiev, as well as Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, and Dnipro. Russia remains unpunished for its continuing war crimes. Deepest condolences to the victims on this awful night. Max 25 people are being rescued from the fire. There are already 12 victims in Ternopil. There may be more, and that was some time ago. An industrial facility and 2 residential buildings were hit. More than 40 injured, etc., etc. Many taken to in medical facilities. Just another striking image. And here we have Lviv, where energy infrastructure was hit, as well as woodworking plant and a warehouse. Large fires are burning, particularly in civilian tire storage sites and the city's outskirts. Emergency crews are struggling to contain the blaze. It's also like a food restaurant chain's been hit. A huge fire burning. I hope that's just sort of tires, something that's not the end of the world. But yeah, Lviv struggling there. And in Lviv, a Russian missile strike sparked fires at a food industry warehouse, destroying the production site of the Pizza Hut restaurant chain. One of the many attacks on civilian infrastructure overnight, as you can see there. And then we have Kharkiv here. 17 explosions rocked Kharkiv tonight. So this is a report from last night, and there'll be more details now, with at least 1 strike hitting a residential high-rise. Power outages are reported. City emergency crews respond. The scale of the damage is being assessed. Here we have another video of a fire on the streets with many cars on fire, supermarkets, vehicles, other infrastructure damaged. Russia continues making Kharkiv's life pure hell under the pretext of liberation and whatever their excuse for terror is. And then we have the moment a Kharkiv store was struck last night. This is the Silpo that was struck. I don't know if there was a stadium. I remember seeing lots of, I don't know if it's infrastructure of this site, but you see it in a second. There you go, massive explosion there. I'm going to go back to Tim White here, because he will show you on his thread a lot of what's going on at the moment in these places. Ternopil here, we've got cruise missiles, body bags, the dead lifted from these horrific scenes, just absolutely shocking. We have huge fires in Lviv that we'll come to, I think, in a second. Yeah, more imagery coming from these places where so many, I mean, look at this, cars and people's livelihoods, people's homes, just destroyed in an instant there. But yes, so I'm just going to go actually backwards from where we were before. So just wanted to show you some of these images. So this is Chernihiv as well, where there is smaller scale damage done to residential properties there. And Ivano-Frankivsk, Russia targeted energy facilities there. Drones and missiles struck the region. The remains of cluster munitions found after the attack. So not cluster munitions to be used on an airfield or on troop concentrations. No, cluster munitions used deep into Ukrainian residential areas. It's absolutely sickening. So here we have this huge fire on the outskirts of Lviv, Port Lviv it's called. Massive plumes of smoke bellowing out of that complex there. I don't know. I'm hoping that's something like a tire, something that is not the end of the world if that's on fire. Another view, obviously pollution and destruction aside, as in, it's not some kind of super important military industrial complex or so on and so forth. Another view of the factory burning there, Lviv port just outside of the town. Really significant fires. No injuries reported in Lviv, amazingly. The city is the 5th largest. It was attacked by long-range drones shortly before first light this morning, and some really significant damage done. I mean, look right along that whole warehouse complex there, or industrial commercial complex. Just huge damage done in Lviv. And its surrounding region. Sambir, just 30 miles, 50 kilometers from the border with Poland, was struck. Industrial facility was there was hit, so could well be something to do with producing for the military. Here we have the huge smoke plumes coming from, I mean, it looks like this is Ternopil. That's different from this billowing smoke here, and you can see the color is different, indicating it's got a chemical. It's comprised of different chemicals. Energy was Russia's main target, with plausible deniability when they deliberately hit apartment blocks in Ternopil. One hit has caused chlorine levels to be at dangerous levels. Residents are told to shut the windows. Although that could be the one from Lviv. It says moving to Lviv, thick smoke has engulfed the city. I don't know. That looks different color smoke, but it could be the sunlight that's shining on it, actually, to be fair. So it might be from the same incident rather than that. I was thinking that might be the chlorine burning. But anyway, yeah, just huge damage done all over the shop. So really difficult night for the Ukrainians, unfortunately. We'll learn more as the day goes on. Now, going back to just finish off what's been happening in Ukraine, we have the claim that now there are a couple of Kinzhals that have been launched towards Zhytomyr, possibly towards Ternopil again. Don't know what's happened with them, but that is like right now there are those aeroballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, heading their way to some target in Ukraine. DTECs also claimed that a thermal power plant's been hit. It doesn't say anywhere here. Max 25 doesn't say, but it might be Dnipropetrovsk. DTEC thermal power plant equipment damage. Work is underway to eliminate the consequences of the shelling. This is the 5th attack on the company's thermal power plant in the past 2 months. And here we hear from Max 25 that 5 energy workers have been injured in a drone attack in Dnipropetrovsk region. The enemy struck the territory of one of DTEC's divisions. A brigade that was at the facility was injured. 1 energy worker is in serious condition. 4 others have contusion and shrapnel wounds. So energy workers at that establishment quite badly injured by the sounds of it there, by attack on an energy plant or some kind of facility. Russian strikes have caused catastrophic damage to Ukraine's energy infrastructure, destroying almost 70% of the country's generation capacity, according to the think tank Green Deal Ukraine. Tactics have shifted in 2025. While Russia still attacks energy transmission, with a focus on smaller local elements of the distribution network, attacks have recently intensified on Ukraine's gas and centralized heating. So all elements of the energy production and storage and transmission and distribution are being targeted by the Russians. Same with the Ukrainians, but it looks like the Russians, with Ukraine being a smaller country than Russia, Russians are able to, it's more like shooting fish in a barrel. When firing into Ukraine, they can pretty much hit where they want in Ukraine. Ukraine struggles to do the same to Russia because it's such a much bigger country. However, there was some success last night. Ilsk oil refinery was apparently hit. Don't know what the BDA, their battle damage assessment, is for that one, but we also hear that a strike has been recorded on the Ryazan GRES Novomichurinsk power station in the region overnight, with Russian channels claiming units 4 and 5 were completely destroyed. It's another blow to Russia's power infrastructure, says Null reports. So it's the second largest non-nuclear thermal power plant in European Russia, and the 5th or 6th largest in the entire country. So that could be very, very significant. Then I reported that there were 2 power plants that were struck in 2 nights ago. I reported that in my video yesterday morning, saying that it looked like this was initially 1 power station, but it was the video was a splicing of 2 power stations together, and then more and more information came up about that. So 1 separate SBS center was hit with FP2 drones. No, the first, sorry. That's the first separate SBS center. So the SBS is the Unmanned Systems Forces, but with the Ukrainian acronym, hit with FP2 drones 2 thermal power plants in Donetsk region, according to Cyber Boroshino. That's the Zuivska thermal power plant. VRP section with switching equipment was hit, transformer and boiler room, and then the Starobeshivska thermal power plant, the transformer 1 and 2 were hit, and a boiler room as well. So there is geolocated evidence that 2 power plants were indeed struck, although they look somewhat similar. I was having a discussion with someone on my thread yesterday who was saying, no, I think it's just 1. No, definitely 2. And indeed, occupied Donetsk region has declared a state of emergency after strikes damaged both the Zuivka and the Starobeshevy power plants, according to the occupation head, Denis Pushilin. So, in other words, it's admitted by the Russians themselves, or the pro-Russian elements themselves. There's an emergency going on. Indeed, about 500,000 people, which is roughly 65% of occupied Donetsk region, remained without power yesterday. Occupation head Denis Pushilin said schools, boilers, water plants stopped working, disrupting heating and water after Ukrainian strikes on Zuivka and Starobeshevy power stations. So that's the success the Ukrainians have had. We're just going to finish with a little bit more information on Ryazan. So Ukraine's drone strike on Rosneft's Ryazan refinery, one of Russia's largest, has forced the plant to halt crude processing until at least the end of November. According to industry sources, no fuel shipments are expected before December the 1st. It's the latest hit in Ukraine's refinery strike campaign. So some good news for Ukraine, but what was hit last night inside Ukraine by the Russians, I guess time will tell. It's going to be horrific that there have been so many civilian deaths, but the question is also what critical infrastructure has been hit in terms of energy production and distribution and military industrial capacity. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces. Goodness me, lots of information today. I hope you're still with me. Thank you for being so. UK Defence Secretary John Healey has come out and said a piece today that Yantar, a Russian spy ship, has directed lasers at the pilots of the UK vessels and RAF P-8 planes deployed to monitor it. That, quote, that Russian action is deeply dangerous, and this is the second time this year that this ship, the Yantar, has deployed to UK waters. So not only deploying to UK waters, but then as we monitor them, flashing our planes with lasers. So my message to Russia and to Putin is this: we see you, we know what you're doing, and if the Yantar travels south this week, we are ready. Thank you. But of course, ready for what? What do you do back? As they try and dangerously shine lasers in a pilot's eyes, could cause a crash of the plane. What do we do back? If that ship is sailing in our waters, it needs to get out of our waters. How do we ensure that happens? Right, Donald Tusk came out again yesterday and said, as a result of an investigation, we now know it was a Russian secret service that commissioned the blast of the Polish railway and recruited 2 Ukrainians to do it. We also know the identities of the perpetrators who immediately fled Poland for Belarus. So that's really good news that Donald Tusk is coming out and saying, look, first and foremost, Russia was behind this. It's really important to make sure that people aren't confused by the idea that 2 Ukrainians were people that placed the explosives on the Polish railway line as it goes into Ukraine, that these people were doing the bidding of the Russians. This is Russian hybrid warfare. Poland will shut down Russia's last remaining consulate in the country, located in Gdansk, in direct response to the recent railway sabotage. Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski announced the move after addressing the same, signaling a firm stance against Russian covert operations. Good news there. Now, Russia's seaborne crude exports fell to a 4-week average. I reported this in my video live stream, I think yesterday, in my geopolitical video yesterday, sorry, fell to a 4-week average of 3.36 million barrels per day, the lowest since August. Gross export revenues dropped to $1.2 billion a week. It's the weakest since April 2023. And US sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil combined with lower prices are curbing flows and delaying discharges in Asia. So I was saying to you that not only are they not producing as much because they've had very direct sanctions by Ukrainian missiles, not producing as much, and what they are producing is being sold at incredibly low prices, arguably in some cases below break even. So making a loss on it, and they're not selling enough of it. But they have to at least sell some to keep the pipes flowing and keep the oil wells extracting. So they're in a bit of a bind, the Russians there. Now, 50 Ukrainians were deported from the US to Ukraine, according to State Border Service of Ukraine. Talking about people without US citizenship. The reason for the deportation is still unknown, but obviously the US is cracking down on migrants, and it has rehomed, or not rehomed, it's sent back, deported 50 Ukrainians from the US. The talks between Steve Witkoff and Andrei Yermak scheduled for actually today in Turkey have been cancelled. So Witkoff probably didn't realize the scale of the scandal he was getting into by agreeing to this meeting, is a quote there from Oliver Carroll in The Economist. Now, this refers to the scandal that's rumbling on. It's really super important. I had one criticism yesterday, and it's kind of justified, that I hadn't spoken much about the scandal yet. I'm very happy to talk about American scandals with the Trump White House and reform scandals in the UK. The reason is I don't know enough about this scandal. So what happened? This happened while I was away at a music festival, and I haven't been able to catch up yet on learning. I had basically had 3 days of not being able to research stuff nearly adequately enough. So I just don't know enough about this, but it is super important. And it looks like Andrei Yermak might be the scapegoat, might go, but it could also put a lot of pressure on Zelensky and his own party, the Servant of the People party that's ruling. There have been some machinations going on in the Verkhovna Rada and votes going on there and vetoes and all sorts. So this is much, much bigger than I have probably indicated to you, but I haven't indicated more because I don't know more. But I will. But so this is due to be hopefully my third video of the day. Will be talking about this. Talks scheduled in Turkey between US envoy Steve Witkoff and Andrei Yermak have been cancelled, as mentioned. Yes, so MP Fedor Venislavsky from Zelensky's Servant of the People party has publicly called for Andrei Yermak's resignation. He confirmed widespread discussion with the faction about removing the head of the president's office, especially after allegations tied to the Mindich tapes. I don't know how Yermak is connected to the Mindich tapes and the energy, Energoatom and energy sector corruption scandal, but he appears to be. So yeah, more on that when I find out. So now it appears that, you know, not just Andrei Yermak and Witkoff, but Witkoff and Zelensky's meeting in Turkey has been cancelled. US President's special envoy has reportedly postponed his trip. Instead, Witkoff discussed the peace plan with Rustem Umerov, the former defense minister, at a meeting in Miami this week. And there's been this claim that Rustem Umerov is in America. He's got family in America. And he's never returning to Ukraine. So, yeah, I think Zelensky is in Turkey at the moment with Umerov. So Witkoff is now no longer going. But there is this Politico reports that Army Secretary Dan Driscoll and General Randy George are in Kiev. The highest level Trump Pentagon visit yet. They're meeting Ukrainian leaders to discuss stalled peace efforts and expand tech sharing, especially on drones. So some people are saying this is really big, and this is about, you know, trying to get the peace deal back up. But actually, No Reports is much more cynical. He says they are only there for themselves. They're just trying to extract tech information, tech knowledge, and try and get a peace deal in order to get you know, peace to get economic trade deals with Russia sorted, etc., etc. So, and that leads me on to Axios. So Axios reports that Scoop, US secretly drafting a new plan to end Ukraine war. They've very charitably titled that. It should say the US is secretly working with Russia to plan an end to Ukraine, the war in Ukraine. So the Trump team is secretly drafting a 28-point peace plan for Ukraine in coordination with Russia. It's led by envoy Steve Witkoff. The plan covers peace terms, security guarantees, the US-Russia-Ukraine relations. Talks have included Kirill Dmitriev, that's nice, with quiet outreach to Kyiv and European allies. Quiet outreach with a bit of an afterthought. So yeah, the US is holding these secret talks with Moscow to end the war in Ukraine. You can imagine this is Trump going back to his original kind of positioning of appeasement for Russia. Let's try and sort out Ukraine. Let's discuss Ukraine, talk about Ukraine without Ukraine. So the 28 peace plan falls into 4 general categories: peace in Ukraine, security guarantees, security in Europe, future US relations with Russia and Ukraine. Of course, things like security guarantees can't be sorted out with Russia. That needs to be sorted out with NATO, with coalition of the willing, with European allies. Russian envoy Dmitriev expressed optimism about the deal's chances of success and said Moscow feels that Russia's position is truly being heard. Whatever, mate. Get out, Dodge. Right, that's enough from me. An awful lot of information and yet more to come out today, no doubt. It was a very busy night last night. Remember, if you do have time, please click the bell and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. That would really, really help. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.